In the previous part, we've studied about Marathas after Shivaji. So, Shivaji had two sons who were Shambhaji and Rajaram. And Aurangzeb wanted to capture whole of this Deccan, so he started with the Bijapur and Golconda, and he has also captured Shambhaji and executed him. So after this, he took over Raigad, which was the Maratha capital. Then Shambhaji's second son, who was Rajaram, has fled to this place, which was in Tamil Nadu. So the war between, or the dispute between the Marathas and Aurangzeb has also fled to the southern parts of India. And Aurangzeb was unsuccessful in his mission of conquering the Marathas. So after Rajaram, his queen Tatarabai has also played a significant role in keeping the Maratha kingdom and conquering large parts of India. So under her rule also, they had expanded their kingdom to a great extent. And during Shivaji's time, this was more centralized. So the power was more centralized because when the area is smaller, the power will be centralized. But when the area has started to increase, then the grassroots policies, or it was more decentralized. So it had went to the local rulers as well, and there were some problems in the ruling, or it was causing some inconvenience for local people, but at the end of the day, everything was for the people's welfare. And we also studied about the Peshwas, who were like the prime ministers, and sometimes they had more power than the king himself. So they even used to rule the king itself, but it was for the welfare of the people. And we've also seen about many others who had helped in capturing the Delhi for the Marathas. Later, due to the Anglo wars with the British, they had to lose, the Marathas had to lose to the British. So initially, Marathas have took over the Mughals, and then the Marathas were took over by the British due to many reasons. So starting with the Maratha administration. So first is the civilian administration. Shivaji instituted a relatively centralized administration for his kingdom. He abolished the hereditary posts generally practiced under the sultans or the Mughals and the land settlements, and paid a salary to every government official out of the state treasury. And many officials were periodically transferred as well, ensuring that they would not have enough power to dictate the terms to the king. Shivaji also gave permissions to widows of soldiers who died in battles, and even offering military posts to their sons. And thus, he had shown his care for the soldiers and their families. So, first we'll see how Shivaji used to do his ruling. So, it was more centralized, that more powers were exercised by the king himself. And his first policy was he abolished hereditary posts. So, even now, in our modern governments also follow this rule that no hereditary post will be given for the government officials, or any officials to be more precise, and it was based on merit. So even though these hereditary posts were followed in the sultans and the Mughals time, these were abolished by Shivaji. And also they used to pay salary to every government official from the out of the state, and many officials were periodically transferred as well. So they used to even follow the transfer system which we follow nowadays as well, and ensuring that they could not have enough power to dictate the terms itself. So if one employee will be at one place for a very long period of time, they will be used to doing that thing, and they may try to do some mishap. And also Shivaji also gave them pensions to the widows of the soldiers. So then invasions used to be there, or there used to be many attacks from outsiders as well. So soldiers are very important, And to ensure that soldiers are they used to ensure their family as well. So if a soldier will die, then his wife will be given pensions and even offering the post to their sons, because if the soldier is the one who is feeding the family or is the head of the family, then it will be a huge problem for the family. So this is a very important policy, and by this they used to show the care for the soldiers and their families as well, because soldiers are the backbone of the whole kingdom. So Shivaji also had an Ashtapradhana Mandala, or the council of 8 ministers. Ashta in the sense 8. So he had a council of 8 ministers to assist him. So these are the 8 ministers. The first is the Pradhan Mantri, Prime Minister, and then the Sachiv, who was the Land Revenue Minister, Nyayadhish, who is the Chief Justice, and the Pandit Rao, the head of religious affairs, Senapati, Commander in Chief, Sumant, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mantri, who is the Intelligence Minister, and Amartya is the Finance Minister. So even in the modern day, we have all these aspects and many more as well. So initially, they used to have the primary 8 ministries, which are as follows, and each one is responsible for a particular section. So the Marathas often levied taxes called chaud, which was 25%, and Sardesh Mukhi an additional 10% from the provinces that were not directly under them, including places in the Deccan and the North India. In return, the Marathas protected their provinces and did not intervene in their internal administration. So the Mughals also approved of this arrangement through various treaties. Over time, some of these provinces became a part of the Maratha Empire. So basically, the Marathas had a taxation system which was called chaud, which was 25%, and an additional 50% was added to those kingdoms which were not under their rule. It was not directly under their rule, but it was that by collecting these taxes, they used to provide protection for these provinces. So either this alliance was formed either due to treaties in the sense if they fought a war and then they had to accept defeat, the other kingdom had to accept defeat, and then they have entered into treaty, or there might be many reasons, but initially normally it used to be 25% was the taxation levied on people, but an extra 10% was also levied so that they used to protect it from any other outside invasions. And over the period of time, even these provinces have become a part of Maratha Empire. So initially it was like they used to provide protection to these provinces, but over the period of time, they have been joined into the Maratha kingdom itself. Next is the military expansions. So with until now we have seen how the civilian administration used to happen. Now military administration. So the Marathas armed forces were divided into 3 parts, which was the infantry, cavalry, and navy. So the cavalry was made up of 2 types of soldiers: the Bhargirs, who horses and equipment was paid by the state, and the Shiladars, whose horses and equipment were paid for by the soldiers themselves. So basically, Marathas had 3 sections of armed forces, which was infantry, and navy. So this again was made up of 2 types of soldiers, who were Gears and so these were the ones whose horses and equipment was paid by the state itself. So they used to have horses and all the other equipments which were paid directly by the state. But here, these horses and equipment were not paid directly by the state. The state will basically pay to the soldier. So these people are responsible for maintaining their horses and equipment. So this was the part including the cavalry. And in the 18th century, the Marathas also noticed the supremacy of European style developed troops and artillery, and they tried to raise and recruit some troops. In particular, Mahatji Shinde had a large European style army. So basically, initially, they used to have the infantry, cavalry, and navy, and we also seen the importance of navy, how importantly Shivaji has kept his navy, and due to this, what advantage has he gained. So now, with the growing of the days, or with the growing days and growing European powers, they have seen the supremacy of the European powers with the modern armed forces. They used to have the modern armed forces. So, what did Mahatji Shinde do? We have already studied about Mahatji Shinde in his role of maintaining the armed forces, and he had a European style army. So he had tried to develop European style army to combat or to give a fight with the European powers as well. Because if we are not developing, if the Marathas were not developing, it would have been difficult for them to actually have a war with the European powers. So the swords, lances were preferred weapons of the Marathas. However, they used guns in sizable numbers, and rockets were used in military campaigns from the days of Shivaji himself. And by 1770, a metal tube rockets were also being introduced. So basically, their preferred rockets were our traditional swords and lances. But with the growing things, they also started using guns, but in sizable numbers, and also rockets were used in the Shivaji's time itself. And by 1770, metal tube rockets were also being introduced. So as we have saw earlier, forts were initially the mainstay of the Maratha powers. So they used to occupy the unoccupied, or those which were not taken proper care of. And Shivaji has controlled and built a considerable number of forts, as they were essential to strategically control important routes and shelter the armies were engaging in guerrilla warfare. So we had seen the importance of forts, how Shivaji used to capture and all these things, and this was one of their strategy in war, because they can maintain their army and it will be proper to capture that particular routes and also know the place much better, and all these things will be there when they had a fort under their control. And Ramachandra Pant Amadhya, the finance minister of Shivaji, in the work in his work The Royal Edict, has explains that forts are the core of the state. In their absence, the land gets devastated in the face of an invasion. Therefore, all the former kings secured the country by building forts. So this kingdom, Maratha kingdom, was created by great master was Shivaji from forts alone. A great enemy like Aurangzeb invaded, conquered great empires like Bijapur, Bhagyanagar, but it was due to the forts that the Maratha state was survived even due to decades of onslaught. So we can see that basically Shivaji's whole of the empire started with the forts, the unoccupied ones, and all these things. And even though Aurangzeb was able to conquer Bijapur and Bhagyanagar, which were well established, but he wasn't able to conquer Maratha kingdom because of these forts itself. So this was what their finance minister has told in one of his works. So until now we have seen about the military administration. Now the maritime supremacy. As we have seen, Shivaji has created army to secure the coast. So in the 18th century, Kanhoji Ange has guided the Marathas to conquer in many naval battles. and thanks to the clever use of geography and battle tactics, even though the Maratha ships are not being as technologically advanced as European ones. So, now the maritime we can have, or the like the navy. So basically, I've seen how Shivaji has prepared his navy in the west coast itself, and even though they were not having the well equipped or advanced technologies, but they were able to do it because of the help of Kanhoji Angre and also the clever use of geography, and he had some tactics due to which they were able to have victory against the Europeans. So at that time, the main strength of Europeans in India were their navies. So they used to have proper navies which the Indians have not paid much attention to. And they forced Indians to purchase their naval trade passes, which was Carthage in Portuguese, which we'll study in the later chapter, which was levied on the Arabian Sea for all the ships which were passing. So due to this only, they had took the spice trade under their control. The Portuguese has took the spice trade under their control, the India and Europe spice trade. And any ship without a pass was confiscated. And the Marathas has challenged this practice and started demanding passes from the Europeans themselves, who showed their frustration by labeling the Kanhoji Angre as a pirate. So basically, initially, the Portuguese used to levy or start these caste system, but later the Marathas have also started to say the same thing to the Europeans, due to which they got the frustration, and they've also shown their frustration by labeling Kanhoji Angre as a pirate. So these were the Maratha ships attacking English ships. So until now we have completed about the military. Now the judicial system. So the Marathas had an effective judicial system, remarkable for its moderation in using capital punishment, that is the death penalty. The panchayat, not to be confused with the current day panchayat, was a local gathering of officials and prominent men and the main body that has delivered justice. So basically, when we talk or speak of the word panchayat, it is not the modern day panchayat. That time, it used to be of the government officials and prominent men and the main body that delivered justice. So at that time, panchayat was the one which used to do or take care of the judicial systems. So an appeal could be made to the Maratha chief in case of an unsatisfactory verdict. So whatever verdict has come in the panchayat, if you're not satisfied with it, then you can appeal in the or to the Maratha chief. So additionally, in various prominent towns as in Pune, Indore, the Kotwal or the police was also deployed to ensure law and order within the city. So there was the panchayat. If you are not happy with it, you can go to the Maratha in chief. And even in prominent cities like Pune and Indore, they used to have a police who was deployed to ensure the law and order within the city. So now I've completed, and then the trade networks. So Shivaji has encouraged trade and actively participated in maritime foreign trade himself, and he and his officials had their own ships which they regularly sent to the ports as far away as Mocha in Yemen, Muscat in Oman, and Malacca in Malaysia, and some of these ships carried things like gold and textiles. And the roads were constructed and maintained, and in places such as Odisha in the 18th century, a network of ferries were maintained for the riverine transport, and bridges were also built over the rivers and small streams. So basically, they encouraged trade, and trade, even the overseas trade was encouraged. So due to the overseas trade only, the gold and the textiles were exchanged, and also they had went far away to all these places. And they also constructed bridges over the rivers and streams, which could make the local trade, internal trade, more active as well. So now, the cultural revival. So the Marathas have contributed subsequently to India's cultural developments, and Shivaji's vision of Swarajya is evident in his seal itself. So Swarajya was evident in his seal as well, which carried a Sanskrit inscription, which was a notable departure from the prevalent Persian seals. So the seal of Shivaji, the son of Shaji, waxing like the new moon, revered by the world, signs for the welfare of the people, arranges for the welfare of the people. So Shivaji also commissioned a treatise called Rajya Vyavahara Kosha with the aim of promoting Marathi language. So they had this Rajya Vyavahara Kosha, which was having the aim of protecting the Maratha language, and it provided Sanskrit equivalents for the prevalent Persian words used in the diplomatic exchanges. As a result of this, the percentage of foreign loan words in Maratha diplomacy have reduced considerably, and Shivaji was a devout Hindu who respected other religions while upholding his own, and his saffron colored flag was adopted by all the Marathas, and he rebuilt the temples which were damaged and promoted Sanskrit and Hindi literatures, religious institutions, and traditional arts. So basically, they had commissioned the Rajya Vyavahara, and they've also reduced the Persian words which were used in diplomacy. And also, he was a Hindu himself, but he has respected all the religious people, and they have followed a saffron colored flag which was adopted by all the Marathas, and they have rebuilt the temples which were damaged and also promoted Sanskrit and Marathi literatures, religious institutions, and traditional arts. But perhaps he contributed most to the revival of ancient Indian culture and values by giving people a demonstration that mighty kingdoms and empires could be defeated, and the Marathas could maintain and expand and administer an empire of their own. So they have provided confidence that the Marathas could also maintain a large and administer large empire on their own. So this has provided confidence to the other Indian kings as well. So Shivaji's example has continued to inspire his successors. For instance, the Bonsles of Nagpur emerged as enthusiastic supporters of local culture, and the worship of the deity Jagannath at Puri in Odisha, which was often interrupted during the Mughal rule, was revived with the support of the Marathas itself. So, with the support of the Marathas itself, the worship of the deity Jagannath Puri was again started, but perhaps the most impressive contribution came from a few remarkable Maratha women as well. So, even the Maratha women had played a significant role in the Maratha Empire. So, in focus, we'll be seeing about Thanjavur. So, let us turn southwards to witness another example of cultural contribution. Ekoji, who was the half brother of Shivaji, has conquered the Thanjavur region, which was in present day Tamil Nadu, in the 17th century, and marking the beginning of the Maratha rule in this area. So, the Maratha rule in the south has moved starting with Thanjavur, which was conquered by Shivaji's half brother. So, the Thanjavur Marathas especially helped create a syncretic culture that was rich and full of innovations. And they were great patrons of the arts, and many of the rulers themselves were poets and dramatists. So, due to this, when they moved to the south, they have realized a lot more culture which was unique. Of all the Thanjavur Maratha rulers, the contributions of Sarfoji II was the most notable one, and he was well versed in many Indian and European languages and wrote a Marathi play which was known as the Devendra Kuravanji, where he says the world geography in detail as well as known at the time. And Sarfoji has patronized many talented musicians, that it was during his time the modern Carnatic music has took shape, and as did the early stages of famous classical dance form which was Bharatanatyam. So the Sarfoji too has played a major role in the cultural revival of India, and he has also seen the famous the dance form which was Bharatanatyam, and he wrote a Maratha play himself, and he had best described the geography as per that period of time according to his particular knowledge, and has also patronized many talented musicians during his period, and also the modern Carnatic music has took shape. And Sarfoji was quite interested in medicine and established the Dhanvantari Mahal, a center of medicine that offered free treatment using both the Indian and Western medicines. So it used to use both Indian and Western medicines, which was the Dhanvantari Mahal. And he also started a printing press, the first such example in India by a native ruler. And he got the history of the Bhonsle family inscribed on the walls of the Brihadishwara temple. And the at Thanjavur, which was one of the largest single inscriptions in India, which was a record of posterity. So these were all the things which Sarfoji has done. And the cultural environment of Thanjavur was multilingual. Multilingual in the sense many languages were there in a single place. So with the mix of many influences, the local culture, the Telugu culture of the former rulers and the current rulers were the Maratha cultures together used to live freely. Moving on to Maratha legacy. So the Maratha rule challenged Mughal dominance and established the largest Indian empire even before the British has took over the subcontinent, controlling much of the central and the northern India, and they set up a new way of governing with efficient administration and also revived the local Hindu traditions without the religious problems, and their brave fight against the oppressive foreign rule was driven by fiery ideal of Swarajya, freedom, and also later inspired many Indians to believe that they could govern themselves, planting the early seeds for India's freedom movement. So the Marathas rule has given confidence to Indians that even we can rule ourselves properly all over the place, and all these things have provided inspiration to many other Indians for the future fight. So with this we have completed the chapter.